You never say never in wrestling. Although that phrase is used so much in sports entertainment, it should now probably be changed to never say never in wrestling, because never say never in wrestling is said too much. I hurt my brain. The point is that has rung true over and over throughout the years, which means we have ended up with a couple of wrestlers in the ring and you just stare at it and you think, well, how the flub has that happened? But it does, because wrestling has this funny way of just sorting life out. It's like Jurassic Park. Somehow all the ducks line up in a row as if they've eaten some kind of aggressive bread, and that's why I'm Simon from What Culture, and these are 10 wrestlers you will never believed shared the ring with each other. Number 10, the Ultimate Warrior versus Orlando Jordan. I don't get this one at all. I mean, the Ultimate Warrior was notoriously known for not only hand-picking his opponents because he didn't want to work with anyone, but also saying, all right, I'll do it, but you gotta pay me $1 billion. And no offense to Orlando Jordan, but I don't really think he's on that level, and I bet he didn't get anywhere near that much cash. But still, 10 years after that train wreck of Halloween Havoc 1998 when the Ultimate Warrior took on Hulk Hogan for round 2, he returned to the ring, and yes, the person staring back at him from across the ring was Orlando Jordan. I mean, my word. It also went down in Spain for New Wrestling Evolution, and I will tell you this, never go and try and find out what the build was. Never watch the promo they did beforehand. All of it will just ruin any childhood memories you have. And in fact, when it comes to the Ultimate Warrior, you should probably just keep them in your mind, otherwise you're going to be sad. The controversy happening away from the cameras also makes this very hard to watch, but hey, there you go. This is the Ultimate Warrior's last ever wrestling match, and back in sort of like the early 90s, you never would have called it. Number 9, John Cena and Kazarian. You forget how long Kazarian has been going and he's still smashing it, and that's kind of the same for John Cena. I know he's semi-retired now, but he is coming up for a 2-decade performer, and that doesn't just happen. When they were both finding their feet in Rick Bassman's Ultimate Pro Wrestling though, they did indeed lock up, and think how interesting that is from a future perspective, because John Cena went the WWE route and became the face that runs the place, whereas Kazarian hit the indies and finally smashed it in the big time when he arrived in AEW. You can see this on YouTube too, and you may be surprised about John Cena's mat work, although you could also argue that's down to Kazarian and his particular skill set. But as they say, it takes 2 to tango, and John Cena is dancing away. Number 8, Daniel Bryan and Kamala. I mean, how? In 1992, when Kamala was taking on The Undertaker, it would be another 7 years before Daniel Bryan even debuted, and the world went kapow and made this thing happen. But in 2006, the future Yes Man would defend his Ring of Honor title in Liberty States Wrestling, and yes, across the other side of that ring was Kamala. And just to sort of underline the eras these two guys came from, Kamala went up to Daniel Bryan and went, ha, I don't want to lose. As ever, Bryan couldn't have given 2 hoots, and he threw himself around the place like he was selling, taking on this giant monster. He even acted scared when they went to lock up, because he was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It was proof, 14 years ago, that Daniel Bryan was already the best. The match itself is exactly what you think it would be, but there is an odd novelty to it, because your eyes can't believe what you are seeing. I mean, Kamala and Daniel Bryan. Number 7, The Undertaker and New Jack. Just when you thought it couldn't get any stranger. I mean, on the one end, you've got The Undertaker that would barely ever break kayfabe, and on the other, you have New Jack, who either would break it all the time or didn't know what kayfabe was, because he basically acted like wrestling was real. It's not like this happened in the late 80s either. This was in the mid 90s when The Undertaker was a huge established WWF star, but it came about because World Wrestling Federation and Smoky Mountain Wrestling were doing a talent exchange, which saw the dead man head down there, and away he went. He also teamed up with Tracy Smothers to take on the Gangsters, which yes, included New Jack. This was 1995. WWF had just lost their minds. I don't think you'll be able to find the match online. I looked and couldn't find zip, but you are able to find some of the promos that not only feature New Jack and D'Lo Brown heading to a cemetery, but then they get really scared and they run away. They didn't want to be killed by the Phenom. Number 6, Vader and Will Ospreay. Very much the internet being the internet, when Vader saw that infamous clip of Will Ospreay and Ricochet just flying around the ring like they were aeroplanes, he wasn't happy and he kicked off. Good grief, did it create a storm. He made sure to let everybody know about this as well, but because Twitter is just this crazy platform, Will Ospreay in 2016 bit, and before long, they were actually having a wrestling match. Now, very sadly, this was after Vader had hit his peak and was absolutely on the way down, so they couldn't do much, but you tell me this, were fans excited? Yes, they were, because they just couldn't believe it. Vader versus Will Ospreay. Then it's like Muhammad Ali taking on my foot. As ever, the Mastodon didn't want to lose and he didn't want to sell much either, so it was up to Ospreay to just chuck himself around the ring like he was about to fly through the roof. And yeah, it's kind of okay, but it's also kind of disappointing. Vader doesn't really want to do anything. I still don't know how this came together though, because it seems so far-fetched. Vader gets annoyed about a wrestling clip and because of that, wrestles one of the guys. Talk about being worked. Number 5, Toshiaki Kawada and Mick Foley. This happened in 2004. That's right, the same year that Mick Foley decided he was going to make Randy Orton a bigger star than ever. He just popped on a plane, flew over to Japan, and had a match with Kawada. Like you do. The reason it raised so many eyebrows though is that both guys throughout their careers had just tried to destroy opponents, so now they were in the same ring, fans are like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? One of them is probably just going to explode. And the answer actually is that they didn't do anything too crazy because of their age, but they still knock the absolute stuffing out of each other. I mean, this is so stiff, and there's kind of like a side plot that Mick Foley wants to use a barbed wire baseball bat, but he can't. But even then, I don't really enjoy seeing two dudes that clearly have a lot of miles on them trying to like make the other one break. It's never going to win any awards or anything like that, and some people do come away going, well, that was disappointing. But you have to remember the context. It's not like they're spring chickens. Number 4, Trent and Ricky Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat remains one of the best baby faces ever. This was true when he retired in 1994 and was still true when he came back to the ring for WrestleMania when he took on Chris Jericho. And the following month when he was at Backlash doing the same thing, the man could probably be good at wrestling until he was 409. Because the wrestling world is crazy, despite only debuting in 2004, we did actually get a match between Trent and Ricky Steamboat, and it happened down in FCW. Clearly still feeling the bug as he had made this little bit of a comeback. He went down there with his son Richie in 2010, and they were taking on the Dude Busters. And I'm going to give you one guess. Who do you think one member of the Dude Busters were? If you said anything other than Trent, you haven't been listening and you need to pay more attention. The ridiculous thing is that if Ricky Steamboat wanted to come back tomorrow, somehow he would still make it work. The man is just so damn smooth and maybe one of the most underrated ever, even though everybody rates him. Number 3, Hardcore Holly and Karrion Kross. Hardcore Holly is still kinda going. Think of that. He turns up in the odd indie promotion here and there, he kicks somebody's ass, and then he goes home. Just what Hardcore Holly does. So as recent as 2019, Holly was still doing this. He found himself in Maverick Wrestling, where yes, he decided to take on former NXT champion Karrion Kross. And the weird thing is that this just seems to be Hardcore Holly's jam. He doesn't take on the more like flippy dippy super up and down left right wrestlers. He just wants to take on sort of the traditional big dudes and punch him in the face. And I guess because he's Hardcore Holly, everybody is happy to accept it. And that's all this was too. It goes around 10 minutes. Karrion Kross probably woke up the next day going, ow, my back is killing me. Whereas Hardcore Holly, I assume, has regenerative powers, which allows him to do this day in and day out. Also, as Hardcore Holly has been brought up, make sure you read his book. It is the most honest thing in the world. He lays into everyone. It is funny. Number 2, Big Vito and Misawa. One wore a dress in WWE, and the other is one of the biggest wrestling legends ever. I'm leaving this one to you, because you tell me. Before Vito did arrive in the big time over here in the West though, he was doing a Japanese tour with AJPW, or All Japan, where yes, he encountered Misawa as part of a tag team match. Big Vito was also on the losing end here and got pinned by Misawa, and his name in Japan was Skull Von Crusher, which is the most wrestling name I've ever heard in my life. And what is terrifying is when you start flipping things around and imagining this happened in an alternative reality. Because if it had gone down in World Championship Wrestling, when Vince Russo was booking the territory, he, for some crazy reason, didn't think that Japanese wrestlers would ever be accepted by an American audience, so you wouldn't push them. Which meant if you got Vito versus Misawa there, he would have put Vito over. And look, that's no disrespect to Vito. He absolutely smashed it, but come on. Number 1, Sid versus Jinder Mahal. Booking Sid Justice for your show was hard. Well, no, that bit was easy. The hard bit was trying to make him show up, because usually what would happen is he would accept the cash, and then come the day of your event, he was nowhere to be found. And these aren't my words, just type it into the internet. It's why when he actually lost to Eddie Kingston at 2011's PWS Refuse to Lose event, and the irony of that name, people couldn't believe it, and they had that same shock when he arrived in another indie promotion to take on Jinder Mahal, who at that point wasn't even Jinder Mahal. Now, Sid barely did anything, both on the offense and the defense, and even stranger, when he was trying to beat up Jinder Mahal, he kind of turned into Hulk Hogan, like he's raking his back and he's dropping the leg. I don't know what was going on here. When the match was done too, you could tell that he wanted to leave because he just rolls out and he runs away because he just wants to get home. But look, I guess that's what he was paid to do, and if he wants to fly back to Gibraltar, I don't know where Sid Justice lives, that's his prerogative. And of course, when he is there, he'll do a little bit of softball. Again, if you know, you know. If you don't know, don't worry about it. But come on, who the hell thought any of these were real, let alone something you can check out now on the internet? Now, don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know any more crazy wrestling matchups that did happen. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Head over to whatculture.com, read yourselves some articles, follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE, and watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture. I've got a big bald head, in case you weren't able to see it, and I'll see you on the next one.